There are three things that a child can exhibit at an early age that might lead someone to believe that they could grow up to be a serial killer. These three things, known as the McDonald Triad, are bedwetting, animal cruelty, and starting fires. These three behaviors combined were used to indicate whether or not a child could grow up with a mental health challenge or become a murderer. And we've seen evidence of this with serial killers like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, who both exhibited these behaviors as children. But what if instead of being destructive, the child is actually described as brilliant, a genius, kind, but then secretly admits to being evil in her journals? Today, we are going to be talking about Carly Gregg, the 15-year-old who is serving a life sentence for killing her own mother earlier this year. Now, this is a very nuanced and complicated case, so I'm going to have a lot of questions for you. I want you to sit back, relax, and take a deep breath. It's time to let the fresh air in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new. My name is Erin, and I am fascinated by all things cult, true crime, and unique spiritual practices. I post a couple videos every single week, so if you like this sort of thing too, please consider subscribing. I would really love to have you here. Also, okay, last year when I started my channel, I would always recommend a book at the beginning of my videos, and I'm going to kind of get back into that. Obviously, you can see I love reading, and I have become a romantasy girly. At first, I was like, I am not going to get into this, but then I read Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, and I was like, I need more, I need more. So now I've been reading the ACOTAR series, The Court of Thorns and Roses. Huh, it is so good. It is so good. I need Rhysand to be real, if that's how you pronounce his name. But seriously, if you like smutty romance novels that are set in a fantasy world, you're going to love it. It's incredible. I am on the bandwagon. It is my new personality. Just in case you were wondering what to read next, and just to bring a little lightheartedness before we jump into this very disturbing case. So, this case was just recently in the media because the perpetrator is a minor. So, there was actually a gag order in place to protect her before she went to trial. And her lawyers even asked that the trial be, not recorded, not open to the public. But the judge was like, no, the taxpayers deserve to know what's going on. But this also brings up a lot of conflicting feelings to me. Carly, the murderer in today's case, she's only 15 years old and she was 14 at the time she committed the murder. And as we're going to find out as we move along, she was possibly in the middle of a mental health crisis. And I believe that two things can be true. People can exhibit dangerous behaviors and signs at an early age, and they need to be stopped. Time and time again, it seems like certain behaviors or murder sprees could have been avoided if the parents had gotten their children help a lot sooner. I covered someone back last October who was like a human vampire, and he exhibited all three of those signs from the McDonald Triad. We're talking the bedwetting, the fire starting, and the animal cruelty. And we all know the stories of Jeffrey Dahmer and his dad pulling over and picking up roadkill and disemboweling it at home. So it just makes you think, yes, if a child is exhibiting these behaviors, we need to get them help and make sure that the behavior doesn't escalate. But at the same time, Carly is a teenager, a young teenager. And her parents did try to get her the mental help that she needed. And I like to believe that people can be rehabilitated. So this case has me going back and forth on whether or not I think a life sentence without parole for a minor is appropriate because she was tried as an adult. So, as you watch this video, I really want to hear your point of view. I'm really eager to hear what you think. Is this appropriate? Was the life sentence without parole the right call here? I'm torn because, on one hand, there are moments where I look at all the evidence, I watch the chilling video of her actually committing the crime, where you hear her mother literally dying and screaming. And you see Carly's behavior. You see how strange she's acting. And then you hear about some of the aftermath. And part of you thinks it is intentional. She wanted to kill her parents. But then when we look at some of the other evidence, you can't help but wonder, is this a child who just needs a lot of help? And instead of prison, maybe she needs to go to a mental health care facility? Well, just buckle up, y'all, because we're going to get into it right now. On March 19th, 2024, a concerned friend approached Carly Gregg's mom, Ashley, at school because Carly was behaving kind of erratically. This friend told Ashley, Carly's mom, that he was worried about Carly. He alleged that she was getting into weed and had burner phones to contact who I can only assume was her dealer. And since Carly was only 14 and recently put on antidepressants, this was really concerning for Ashley. And you're probably wondering, how did this kid just approach Carly's mom? Well, Ashley worked at the high school that Carly attended. She was a math teacher. So they went to and from school together every single day. So that night, Ashley drove Carly home and she decided that she was going to confront Ashley about the weed. She then decided to go search Carly's room to find evidence, and she ended up finding a box of vape pens there. And look, this is something serious. 14 is not just young to commit a murder. In my opinion, it's really, really young to be doing any kind of recreational marijuana use. And if I found out my teenage daughter or child had burner phones and was using weed, and I was also trying to get her all the mental health help that she needed, I would be gravely concerned. And this is kind of how the case came alive to the public because there's a home security video that's been circulating the internet. And you can see Carly hiding something behind her back and follow her mother. Then you can hear Ashley scream between two gunshots. Then there was silence, and then a third gunshot. Soon, Carly appears on the screen again, and she's clearly aware that the camera can see her because she's still hiding something behind her back, and she tries to put it up on the stool or the counter behind her. But there was even more to her dark plan. She gets her mother's phone and she texts her stepdad, Heath, pretending to be her mom, asking him when she could expect him at home. And so he tells her, just in 45 minutes. So she waits, and we will find out that she was waiting to shoot her stepfather. She was ready to wipe them both out the same day. And while she waits, she decides that she's going to cover her tracks. She seems to decide to hide the evidence of the camera, and she takes it off the wall and she hides it in the fridge. And to me, all this business with the camera is a major piece of evidence because it shows that she had an awareness that she had to hide evidence. She had an awareness that she was being recorded. She knew going into it she was being recorded, and she thought that by hiding the gun behind her back, she'd be able to get away with it. And then she decides, oh, you know what? I'm just going to try to hide this camera. It's interesting that she doesn't try to destroy the camera. She puts it in the fridge, but maybe she thought since it was cold in there, it would trip up the recording or something. But all of this tells a clear story that she was trying to conceal evidence. And I don't think that people who are having an alleged manic episode would have the forethought to do that. So She was aware of what she was doing, in my opinion, and recognized that she needed to hide the proof. But then she starts texting her friends, almost like she's eager to show off what she just did. She FaceTimed a friend who was very concerned about her behavior, and this friend tells Carly, "Don't hurt anyone." But Carly just says, "Too late." And then, in what might be one of the most disturbing details of this crime, she decides to invite a friend over to show off what she did to her mother, but not before asking this friend if dead bodies made her queasy. Carly hears the garage door open and she readies herself. Immediately when her stepfather Heath enters, she fires the gun at him, but luckily it only grazes his shoulder and he's able to snatch and wrestle the gun away from her, and then she just took off. And he was really shocked, really confused, and very worried. He said that she was not like herself. In fact, she seemed absolutely terrified. And so he became worried that there was an intruder in the house, that she wasn't trying to harm him, but rather tried to protect herself. But as he wandered around the house, it was quiet. He looked around, searching for someone lurking behind a corner. But when he came to Carly's room, he saw the true horror of what happened. His wife was laying on the floor, a towel over her head, and she'd clearly been shot and killed. And even he knew it was likely by his own stepdaughter, Carly. So he immediately called 911. Carly was on the run. She went to a friend's house to hang out for a little bit, and I think the friend was a little put off by her behavior. But then she left and ended up being picked up on the street by the police. And they would begin to unpack the truth of what had happened to her mother. Ashley Smylie was a math teacher in Mississippi at her daughter's high school. She was a Florida girl at heart and loved the ocean and Disney World, which leads me to believe that she was one of those Disney adults. I think she liked to visit a lot. And when you see her picture, she looks like she was a really, really, really sweet person. I don't know. There's something about her smile that just made me feel warm and happy. And I can imagine that she was a really good teacher. And by all accounts, she was really close with Carly. She had just such a sweet light in her eyes, and she really, really cared, not just about her own daughter, but all of her students. She'd even been Teacher of the Year, and her daughter Carly had also been Student of the Month. The pair was described as close. They were two peas in a pod. They traveled to and from school together every single day, and overall, they got along great. Carly loved getting appreciation and accolades, not just from her mother, but from everybody. I mean, Carly was a star student. She's described multiple times as brilliant. She'd even skipped a grade in school and seemed to be just wise beyond her years. And she loved academics, likely because of the love her mother had ingrained in her since she was an educator herself. Carly was the apple of Ashley's eye, especially because the two of them had a lot of shared trauma from Carly's upbringing. Ashley had another daughter who had passed away when Carly was just a young girl. This was an inexplicable loss, and it led to the contentious separation of Ashley and Carly's biological dad, Kevin. So, the relationship as a whole between Ashley and Kevin could be described as toxic to say the least, and it doesn't seem that Kevin was the greatest dad. He was an addict. He was clearly mentally unwell and just didn't really seem to be fit to be the kind of father that Carly needed. He just didn't really seem to know how to parent, evidenced by the anecdote that he once forced Carly to chug beer when she was only 12 years old. Overall, he made both Carly and her mother feel very unsafe. And it's alleged that he had some undiagnosed mental health challenges of his own, one of which is speculated to be schizophrenia. So, when people started looking into Carly's mental health condition, It was alleged that perhaps she too had schizophrenia and was hearing voices telling her to do quote unquote evil things, but that was not confirmed by a single psychologist involved in this trial. And I also want to say, as someone who has a family member who is schizophrenic, a mental health condition doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to go do dangerous things or harm other people, whether it's bipolar, schizophrenia, across the board. It does not necessarily mean that you are driven to do harm unto others. Honestly, I believe it means that you pose the largest threat to yourself because there's something that you're not fully in control of. I know for my family member, this person is a really kind, loving person and was always considered to be top of class, like so incredibly smart, wise beyond their years, just like Carly. And then when they got diagnosed as schizophrenic, it really tore their life apart. It really can change the trajectory of your life, and all of the potential that my family member had kind of disappeared once they got diagnosed. And it's a really, really difficult thing to live with. And so just moving forward, since we're talking heavily about mental health in this episode, I just want us to be really compassionate towards other people that might be having some kind of mental health challenge, because one does not equate the other. Having schizophrenia or bipolar or any of the things that people have alleged that Carly had does not directly lead to violence. And I just want to make that abundantly clear. It can manifest in a lot of different ways. Can things be dangerous if they do go undiagnosed? Yes, but just because you have a diagnosis does not necessarily mean that you are going to be violent. And I don't think that that is a fair excuse for bad behavior, but also when we kind of equate having some kind of mental health diagnosis with a violent tendency, it makes it that much harder for the people who are facing those mental health challenges on a daily basis to feel safe even opening up about what they're dealing with and what their challenges are. So I just wanted to make that very clear. I have a lot of compassion for anyone who has any sort of mental health challenge. I have a fair share of my own, you know? Sometimes you need a good SSRI just to get through the day, or a smutty fairy book. So Ashley felt really unsafe about her ex, Kevin. So unsafe that when she left him, she even kept a gun hidden in the cubby she had in the frame of her bed. So it was well within reach if anything were to happen. And it sounds like it was very accessible. I mean, it's described as being stored basically in a cubby under her bed, like built into her bed frame. So I can only imagine that Carly and Carly's stepfather, who would eventually move in with the two, they both had access to this gun. As far as I know, it doesn't sound like it was locked up anywhere. Now, as Carly grew up and became a teenager, she started exhibiting some of that troubling behavior herself, which of course is very normal as kids become teens, but this seemed to be very similar to some of the behaviors her dad showed. It was a little obsessive. She had begun to struggle with an ED. She began to self harm, although she claimed she didn't have any unaliving ideation. She said she just wanted to feel like she was a little more in control of her emotions. And she also started having mood swings. These mood swings were so severe that not only did her mother notice, but her friends started noticing it too. So Carly had always been a star child. I mean, she was exemplary. And it seemed that a lot of her personal value came from just how smart she was and how good she was at school. And it seemed to kind of inflate her ego a little bit. And so when she had friends that didn't seem to take school as seriously as she did, or maybe even if school was a little harder for them, it's almost like she looked down on them, or that's how they seemed to feel. Like she thought she was better than them because she was doing so well in school. And look, as someone who was always considered to be like a gifted kid, there's a lot of pressure that comes from that, and there's a lot of isolation that comes from that because you are given more work, you're given more responsibilities for your age. I mean, my mom always tells this story that, "Oh, I never, like, cracked open a book at school," but I had to be so meticulous with my time if I wanted to be successful because I had so much work. Most of my weekends were spent doing homework at home while my mom was at work. So it can be very, very isolating to be considered like, oh, a star student. And I'm not saying I'm smarter than anybody else. I think being smart and being good at school can equalize each other, like, but they can also cancel each other out. I'm just really good at memorizing things. Not everyone is. So I could memorize facts and take a test, great. It didn't necessarily mean I was smarter than anybody else. But as a kid, when you're constantly praised for how smart you are and how good in school you are and you're getting all these accolades, it's going to start to feed your ego. Despite Carly's heightened sense of self, she also had become very depressed. And maybe it's because she felt isolated from her peers or those kids who were her own age. I mean, she did skip a year in school, and that can feel strange on its own. But she was so depressed that her mother sought out treatment for her. A pediatrician that her mother had her go see suggested that Carly start engaging in talk therapy and start taking Zoloft. So Carly began her treatment. So, if you don't know, Zoloft is an anti anxiety and depressant. I'm actually on the generic version of it. So, shout out Cetraline babes. But not everyone does too well on Zoloft. And so, just a few weeks before she decided to kill her mother, she was advised to switch over to Lexapro. But she was encouraged to wean off of Zoloft and then introduce Lexapro gradually. And it's really important to do this and listen to your doctor because you're altering the chemicals in your brain. And she's a young adolescent. Combined with her hormones and whatever changes she's experiencing and the mood swings she's having, plus feeling all of this depression and anxiety that she began to self medicate using marijuana, it's very clear that she did not take her doctor's advice. So, like I just said, she was trying to combat not just her depression, but her feelings of anxiety throughout this process. And allegedly, she began to self medicate with weed. And this is very, very dangerous to combine any kind of illicit, anything, whether it's a drug or alcohol, with antidepressants. It can be very, very dangerous. Some people will still drink alcohol while they take their antidepressant and they might not see any symptom changes. I find that when I drink alcohol, it can exacerbate my anxiety. It can make it worse and give me like literal panic attacks. So I really try only to drink like on special occasions. But her body must have just been like a confused chemical cocktail, and I can only imagine made her even more volatile. And it seems that some of her thoughts had become really volatile as well. So Carly, like a lot of kids, kept a journal. And it seems like this is where she left a lot of her inner truth, or what some are reading as her darkest, most evil thoughts. It became very clear during the trial, in the aftermath of all of this, that she had some very polarizing beliefs. A few of them are that she didn't believe in God, she denounced her family, and she even proclaimed in this journal that it's okay to be evil. I started thinking that she was almost like an evil Matilda, like brilliant, so smart, and she has like the Matilda bangs and the bobbed hair. It just I don't know why that's what came to me, but it's just like she's using her intellect for evil instead of good, or like showing the evil adults how they should be parenting or running a school. I don't know why I kept having that visual. It just kept thinking of like evil Matilda. Except she uses her brilliance for evil. And this is something that the state's attorneys would really focus on. They were really against the idea that she was having some kind of mental break. They were really pushing that this was intentional and that this was like a young, evil incarnate girl who would stop at nothing for the rest of her life to just be evil. And it also came to light during the trial that this wasn't the first time she had thought about wanting to kill her parents. Allegedly, she had made remarks to her friends about wanting to kill both of them. But her stepfather, he stood by her. He even mouthed, "I love you" to her during the trial. He really believes that she can be rehabilitated. He believes that she just needs mental health. But on the other hand, her defense is saying that she was suffering from some kind of mental breakdown, a psychosis of sorts, that she blacked out and did not remember doing what she did. But it just seems when you look at her behavior, you look at the video, you consider what happened right before this. Her mother confronts her about weed. And we know that she really needed approval from adults. She really needed her mother in particular's approval. This is a girl that probably hasn't gotten in trouble and probably hasn't been told no a lot in her life because she's always been such a brilliant, exemplary kid. And her mother wants to help her. And if you're mixing weed with an SSRI and you're going through all these hormonal changes, it could be very, very concerning for her mom. So when her mom just barged into her room, I think that she knew she was going to do something drastic to her mother. I mean, she had the wherewithal to hide the weapon from the view of the camera. And that's something that the prosecution was like really holding on to in the trial. They even spoke to her mental health provider who said that like she did not have like an official diagnosis and Carly wasn't always honest when it came to trying to get a diagnosis. So it was really, really difficult to actually assess Carly because they couldn't tell what was true and what wasn't. So this begs the question, was this really a mental health crisis? Did she black out? Was she in psychosis? Or was this premeditated? And this was obviously the focus of both the prosecution and the defense during her trial. There unfortunately was not a ton of evidence to support that Carly had any diagnosed mental health condition. She was on Zoloft and then Lexapro. So it's very clear that she did have some combination of depression and anxiety. People have also alleged that she had schizophrenia and she was hearing these voices and she had unaliving ideation. But Carly herself has even admitted that she never had unaliving ideation. And then when you mix into the picture her journal entries, it does make you feel like perhaps she intended to do this with malice in her heart. But she would still claim that she didn't remember. She just seemed to black out. It's really heartbreaking because you can see on one hand her stepfather still believing in her, even though she tried to murder him and murdered, I'm assuming, the love of his life, his wife, but also having such compassion for her that she's young, she's underage, she's a new teenager, she doesn't even have a driver's license yet. And she's being tried as an adult in Mississippi. So this trial went on for 5 days, and the jury only deliberated for 1 hour before they came back and shared what their verdict was. And they found her guilty on 3 counts: guilty of murder, guilty of attempted murder, and guilty of hiding evidence. So Carly, at just 15 years old, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. What's really unsettling about this whole situation also is she's in an adult prison. She's not like in juvie. She is in an adult prison and has been in solitary confinement for like 185 days or something at this point. That is a very long time. That's like about half a year to not see anyone and only be let out of your cell for an hour a day. But there is a safety hazard for her. I mean, she's a child being locked up with all these adults. And I think it's like illegal in most states for someone to be in solitary for that long. I'm not 100% sure what Mississippi thinks about all of this, but I just find it a little inhumane and I'm a little bit torn because she is so young. She is so young. we still don't understand exactly what mental health crisis she is in or was in. But we also need to hold people accountable for their behavior, and we need to look out for these behaviors in young people to hopefully rehabilitate them or help them before they engage in anything destructive like this. So it's really um, hard for me to decide in a black and white way whether this was the most appropriate. And the more I thought about it, because I want to hear all of your opinions down below, the more I believe that maybe she should be in a mental health facility until she's an adult, and then she can go to prison, and maybe give her the opportunity for parole in, like, maybe another 15 years to see if there are behaviors that could be helped. I just think of all of the young people that I knew growing up who were having challenges and just weren't getting the right help. But on the other hand, do you believe people can be born inherently evil? Do you believe that she can be helped? Maybe it's the naivete in me and the belief that I don't want to see a child go to prison for ever the rest of their life. Maybe I'm being naive, but I want to believe that she could change. Does it excuse what she did? Absolutely not. But was there a mental condition that she wasn't being properly diagnosed with, that she needed help with? I think it's fair to ask that question, and I think it's fair to have her, like, clinically assessed or rehabbed somewhere where she can get a better understanding of her behavior and her feelings, because maybe she does have some underlying condition that is unknown right now. But also, if she's untruthful, if she's admitted to being evil in her journals, where you would share your most intimate truth because you don't anticipate anyone ever reading your journal, maybe she is inherently evil. And maybe she should have been tried as an adult. It's hard for me to draw a line on whether I feel one way or the other. Do I believe that she should be in prison for a significant amount of time? Yes. But do I also believe that there's a possibility that she needs more help than the prison system is going to be able to provide her? Also, yes. So that is the case of Carly Gregg and her mother, Ashley Smylie, and even her stepfather, Heath. What do you guys think? Do you think Carly is inherently evil and needs to be locked up for life without parole? Or do you believe that she does have some kind of mental health condition that needs help and she can be rehabilitated and recognize her wrongdoing and live in the world with the rest of us? I guess I'm not convinced she could live in the world with the rest of us. But I'm torn. Again, I keep going back and forth with my opinion on this one. Anyways, you guys, that's all I have for you today. I feel like this is going to spark a lot of debate in the comments, so I just want to say please keep things polite and kind and compassionate, especially as it pertains to Heath, her father, because he was a victim too. And let's just be kind to each other. The only way we can combat this evil and these terrible occurrences in life is to show compassion to our fellow man. So please be kind to one another in the comments. Thank you all so much for supporting this channel and watching this video. And I always forget to mention I have a Patreon and a membership if you'd like to sign up for either of those. And other than that, y'all, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. Stay safe out there, ask questions, and always stay skeptical. I will see you in my next video very soon. Bye.